easy to like follow them. But at least if you're just trying to catch up to the class and just doing daily things, and also the idea that like understanding what the professor will ask in the exam, that is very important, I think. Like if you just understand like the professor's mental view, like he will make 60-70% of the paper numerical based. You have to understand that sometimes. And actually the professors also sometimes tell you also directly, like he'll make it numerical based. So it's no point in going and memorizing half the chapters and like going to the depth of each point and like memorizing rote memorizing. It doesn't matter. Like you don't do that, right? So I think getting the CGP on the fifth semester is easier, and there's also the you have the ability to take, I think, one or two ESOs. I think one ESO. I think if I'm correctly remembering, to take an ESO, like whenever you're taking an ESO, be very careful about the ESO that you're taking, right? Because it's very very important, like to be getting an A+ in that kind of like subject. Otherwise, the subjects that you'll have in the fifth semester are going to be very easy, and like you'll be able to like get a good grade point if you just, as I'm telling you, follow the class, one. And secondly, you can like look at the previous year papers, like go up and ask seniors for your previous year papers, because like a lot, like we do have them, and like if you ask us for it, we'll somehow try to find it and give it to you. And like more often than not, 60-70% of the papers always come from previous year papers, and that's very important. I think that's the case for a lot of departments, not only petroleum. I think so, and like it gives you an upper hand. Like if you know from beforehand what kind of questions, at least with the previous year paper, you also get the idea of what kind of questions will come. If not the exact same question, but the type of questions, and that gives you an idea of what to study. Like if you're studying just before the exam, like let's say you've been following the class and then you start and sit to study for like 3-4 days before the exam, you need to be very efficient with the way what you're studying. And like for that, I think looking at the previous year paper, understanding what kind of questions can come, and then like targeting those areas specifically. And also like you don't need to memorize everything. Other people are sitting and trying to finish the entire syllabus, and this becomes very like effective in end semesters. When end semesters there's a big syllabus and everyone's trying to just cram everything, and you sit down and calmly target the things which you really need to do, and then you focus on that, and you're like essentially you skip a lot of other stuff. But at the end, that is what comes, because they don't like change that entire like subject in itself. Okay, I'm not able to see the chats. Like if somebody is like, if there are like, you can unmute and ask your questions, but I'm not seeing the chat right now. So I'll if somebody has like can't open their mic, I just see the chat at the end and then like answer the questions, right? So like CGPA wise, that is very important. But right now, if you have a 7.5 or 8 CGPA, it's still okay. And like I think you can be like, if you are able to make good projects, make a good CV, you can get very easily hired. Okay, so like for your internship and stuff. Right. What other thing about? I had one more thing about CGPA. Right. CGPA. Right now, like, yeah, and another one more last thing about CGPA is like, right. So people don't like, for those people who have not got a good CGPA right now, don't feel down about it, because there are other aspects, like I told you, right? This theoretical aspect, projects and internships. You can make the best of these other things, and try and also bag an internship in the fifth semester as well. Like I know few friends who have been able to do that. Right. So I'll tell you also about that, what you can do about that and what not. Okay. Otherwise, like CGPA is important, and if you have a low CGPA, try to improve it in the fifth semester. Now, going on to the next part, this is the most important part of the entire like presentation which I'm going to give. Right. So first, I want you to like focus on reservoir engineering. Right. You can see my mouse hovering, like the cursor hovering, right? If somebody could respond.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in reservoir engineering, the most important topics that you should be covering is like rock properties. Like what do I mean by rock properties? Like essentially, like I think if you guys are writing this down, but like rock properties are things like porosity, permeability, capillary pressure, like capillary pressure. It could be also your surface tension, interfacial tension, whatever. All those things, like essentially the first, like, sorry, second and third chapter of yeah, T Kumar. Okay, T Kumar like T Kumar notes the he has taught reservoir engineering. Whatever notes he has taught in that chapter number 2 and chapter number 3 are essentially the things which are covered in this part, right? Rock properties. Like, so I would advise you, if you want trying to get knowledge of all these areas, first of all you should be going over the T Kumar's notes. Okay, so T Kumar notes is very very important here. Okay, now after that we talk about is like fluid properties. Fluid properties is like not very well covered by T Kumar, but it's there in chapter number 4 if I can correctly remember. And fluid properties essentially include like things like BO is like so we give a volume factor, oil volume factor, and BG, gas volume factor, and RS, R, all those things like solution gas ratio, etc., etc. Right? Those are basic, and viscosity also, density, etc., etc. Those are very important because I still remember in my interview they asked me a question about how BO would be changing with time. BO essentially meaning oil volume factor. Sorry, how it would change with pressure. Sorry, I'm so sorry about that, but like pressure essentially, like when like in reservoir engineering a lot of things always are dependent on how like things are changing with respect to pressure and a lot of stuff. So a lot of the fluid properties changes with pressure, and like knowing the relation of how it is going to change, what is going to change, where it is going to change. Like for example, at bubble point it changes to a certain degree, like there's a sharp change and stuff like that. It helps you like solve or like solve problems, or like self solve, or like whenever in the interview they're asking you certain questions, those questions are very easy to answer if you know these fluid properties, and they're like very very basic and very important concepts to be understood. Okay, so I think that's mainly covering chapter number 4, right, of T Kumar. Then I think you should be doing is volumetric analysis, right? What is essentially volumetric analysis, right? So chapter number 2, 3, 4 were important in T Kumar's notes. After that, chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever it is there, you should be going over them. Okay. Like going over them as a like skimming and like trying to understand the things, but it doesn't require a lot of depth, right? So and but like topics like rock properties and fluid properties, if you get time after you're done with T Kumar's notes, you should go over these parts in the Tariq Ahmed, right? In terms of rock properties, like Tariq Ahmed has this one chapter. Like you guys all know about the Tariq Ahmed book, right? If you could talk about this 1 second. Somebody, if you could write it in the chat, like you guys know about Tariq Ahmed, right? If you don't, then I'll be just
Yes, sir.
adding.
Yes.
Okay, right. So, like so Tariq Ahmed like chapters are there in of rock properties, especially rock properties, very well done in that. And like you have to like I think that chapter, I think it's chapter number 4 if I remember correctly, or chapter number 3 or 4. It's like the name is rock properties itself, and you should be covering that chapter entirely. Like the complete chapter should be covered properly. Okay, for rock properties. Fluid properties, there is on like you should note this down. There's a chapter number 2 for like in case of I think LP Dake, right? LP Dake chapter number 2 is very important, and that is covering the entire fluid property section. Like if you've covered it from T Kumar's notes, then you can move to that part. I'll also send it in the like like that sheet or whatever resources I'm going to give you. Okay, you can see it there as well. But for now, you can jot it down, right? Fluid properties, LP Dake, chapter number 2. Then we can like when we talk about volumetric analysis. So volumetric analysis is essentially like trying to figure out how much oil is there present inside the reservoir. Okay, so there are different methods in doing this, and the like there are like three major methods, right? The first method is using the volumetric analysis using geological methods. Okay, like we don't need to really go into the depth of that, but like getting a like a broad overview. I think this was covered in chapter number 8 of T Kumar's notes. Okay, So that section is important. Okay, like the first geology, only like there are three parts. I told you, like geological part. So geological part is covered already in Tarek with T Kumar's notes. If you want to get a better understanding of it, you can just look it up on the net. It's like very basic stuff. And like there is different rules to follow. Like there's a Simpsons rule. There is if I remember correctly, um I can't remember the other rule, but like there is different two three different rules. You don't need to really go into that depth, but like the idea, since it's more of a geological part, right? It's more of geology than reservoir engineering, but it's still, you should know that it exists, and like to a base degree know understand how it works, right? That is the first method of volumetric analysis, which is the geological method. The second method is material balance. Okay. And material balance is a very, I think, crucial thing which which all reservoir, whoever is trying to get an internship in reservoir engineering, like they should try and get into that, right? Volumetric analysis, the second part is material balance, right? And material balance is not properly covered in T Kumar's notes, so I think you have to go over that in the case of your this Tariq Ahmed, right? Tariq Ahmed, there's an entire chapter dedicated to material balance. But if you have covered rock properties and fluid properties, you have the entire base ready, and you can directly jump to material balance and do it, right? For anybody who's aspiring to be a reservoir, like getting a reservoir engineer, they should do material balance in my perspective. Okay. And after that, the third way of volumetric analysis is decline curve analysis. And decline curve analysis is also, I think, it's not very, you don't need to go into very depth about it. And like it's you can get any YouTube video regarding it, or also it's also in Tariq Ahmed. The entire like part or idea of volumetric analysis, like decline curve, is there. I will also like try and give you some more resources for that also, but you don't need to go into the too much depth into it, right? So the depth is majorly covered in material balance, but for the geological part and for the decline curve analysis, you don't really need to go into that much depth. Okay, so and then finally I've written like go over all the chapters in Tariq Ahmed. So like rock properties, fluid properties, I told you LP Dick, volumetric analysis, especially material balance. Go over these things in Tariq Ahmed only if you have covered T Kumar's notes. Okay. Tariq Ahmed is that one book where like all the things are there, right? And rock properties, fluid properties, etc., etc. Those things I've told you. Do it from T Kumar's notes and then move to, Tariq Ahmed. So that is done for reservoir engineering. Is there any question up to now regarding this? If you can just ask quickly, because I don't think I have a lot of time.
Guys, you can jot down your questions in chat box, please. Please raise your hand and write your question in chat box.
Yes, yes. If there is no questions right now, I'll just move ahead with the other stuff. I don't see any questions, right? Okay. Right. So the next part I'll do is like I'll talk about is production. Like, see, the most important things are, first of all, is reservoir engineering, and then you can move on to stuff about production engineering and like formation evaluation. Like these are the most important things: reservoir engineering, production, and formation evaluation. So when you talk about production, these are the four most important things. Production is very vast. So I won't suggest a book for you, because like if you start doing production from a book, essentially they'll take the entire summer. Well, rather I would say that you should go over like T Kumar's notes for this, right? Again, T Kumar, which he has this subject he has taught you in fourth semester regarding production, like the subject production engineering, right? So like here, the first thing which I've talked about is well completion, right? Well completion is that part where what are different types in which we can complete, like well can be like essentially completed, or like for example, where I want to put the tubing, where I want to put the casing, how many completion zones will be there, etc., etc. All those things come under this, and I think there's a dedicated chapter in T Kumar's notes regarding well completion. Then you can talk about the like types of perforation. Like this is also there, like tubing conveyed and tubing through tubing perforation, all of those things also come under this, where the type of perforation you have to do, type of jet you have to use, like there's perforation guns, there's jet perforation, etc., etc. Right, all of, again, there's a chapter for this, I think you all know that, right, in T Kumar's notes again, so that part you should be doing, right. So after that, there is this, I like, very important concept of IPR and TPR, right? IPR and TPR nodal analysis is like, you have to. This is, I think, in chapter number 5 and 6 of the production engineering subject, and like, first of all, I think you should be covering the T Kumar's notes regarding IPR TPR, and then when you're done with it, then you can to start with, like, other resources. I'll give you a proper resource for this and a video for this, which will like give you very very good clarity about it. Go over that video very well. And but other than that, you don't need to really go into a lot of depth, but it's a very very important concept to understand, for any kind of interview, if you want to go into reservoir production, etc., etc. And last but not least, you should be studying GGS. GGS is I will also talk about GGS, like group gathering station, a bit more later in the other segment of, we'll talk more about it in the like summer training part, because summer training may you will go and see GGS for yourself, like firsthand. So like you will be, they're expected to like tell more about how GGS essentially looks like, what are the different parameters like they're employing in whatever location that you've gone. Let's say you've gone to Ahmedabad or Mehsana, so they have their own GGS. How many wells are this GGS connected to? How many essentially, like, let's say heat treaters are there? How many we have placed? How many storage tanks are there, etc. All of these things come under this part, and like you have to first know a like general idea of the layout of how a GGS looks like, and then like they will try and combine the questions the interviewers will ask. They'll combine it with the knowledge of the GGS you have and with the summer training that you have done, and they will ask you what have you seen in that summer training, how does a GGS layout looks like, etc. All those things. Now in formation evaluation, I'll move ahead. Right, formation evaluation, it is like the entire, like whatever Moria has taught you, everything has to be learned. Okay, like like he has he also has his lectures, right? Like on NPTEL. So I think everybody knows about that, I think, and that needs to, like, the whatever he has taught, that essentially if you just cover that again, I think you've done it in the fourth semester, and that will be more than enough. They'll not ask you questions beyond that anymore, and like there's no point in reading a book for this, because it becomes, again, like production is very vast, and it becomes very, like, it becomes a very big task for you, right? So I just say that go over the notes, go over the videos, and like cover every single chapter. I won't say like cover this chapter or that chapter, but majorly you can talk about how density log, neutron log, resistivity logs, all of these different types of logs essentially work, their working principle, everything. Those things are very important to like study, and they will majorly ask you questions from that. Now moving into reservoir thermodynamics, it's a useless subject essentially in my my opinion, but the first two chapters about how phase behavior happens, like different phases are existing in the oil and gas stage and whatnot. All of that can, like pressure temperature curve, pressure pressure volume curve, all those curves are of phases essentially. Those are very important to be covered, or like they can be, they should be covered at this stage, because like I think there are like a lot of questions in different interviews are asked from those two things only. Like in my interview they asked me about liquid loading, how can that be solved, and like I answered the question with like how you can inject lean gas into it. So lean gas is a concept which was taught by Naya sir in this lecture, and it was covered in the first two chapters, and those two chapters are the most important. Rest you can skip essentially, right? Now we can go into drilling, right? Drilling is a very big subject, and it's not going to give you a lot of benefit if you study the subject itself. That is why I prefer not to talk about it in the first place, but I am talking about it because there is one or two very like rare companies are going to come and ask you about drilling in the first place, right? So drilling is Like they will not go in and ask you about how to design the entire, like, give a proper casing design, give a proper drill string design or whatnot. They're gonna ask you about very like rig components, or they're going to ask you about like what are the different elements inside in a particular drill rig that you have seen, what is like, how does the, like the, the rope which is used in a drill rig, how are they designed, what are the other different types of parameters, what kind of well problems are there, what are the well control measures. These are very conceptual topics, and they don't involve a lot of mathematics or like a lot of rigorous, solving and calculation, which is, I think, the entire subject of drilling is that only, right? Rigorous calculations, rigorous methodology of solving and whatnot. But all of these things aside, you don't need to cover any of those things. But there are certain conceptual parts, are the very, very minute conceptual parts in different locations. I think if you just go over that, and you should do it in the last, like after covering reservoir production formation and the reservoir thermodynamics. If you cover that at the last, it is also enough. Right. So I think that is there. We are done with the knowledge part. Is there any other questions in this segment? If you have any questions, you can keep on asking. And also, like, if you guys are, like, I will send you all the, like, whatever resources required at the end also. So after this we have projects, right? This is an important part because I think like in your CV, like you will be adding a lot of other stuff where your experience, like this ONGC experience and whatnot. But like this is going to take a bigger segment of your CV, and like they will be looking at this, and they're going to direct their questions on the basis of these projects. So like first of all, I would just simply, I will first give you this idea why projects are very important. Projects are very important because now reserve, like entire petroleum, if you like if you go on to an interview and they start asking about random questions from any petroleum sector or like subject, then it becomes very difficult for you to answer them, right? Because you don't have all the knowledge in the world, right? So projects, what they do is like they specifically like for make these interviewers focus on these particular topics. Let's say if you make a project on Klinkenberg effect, they will start asking you questions regarding rock properties first. And they will not go into fluid properties, or they're not going into, let's say, drilling or something, right? So it focuses the interviewer to a particular topic, and that is very strategically good for you as a like who is going into the interview, right? So that is why I think projects are very important. But and I think certain companies look for the projects also, like for example BP, if you're applying for reservoir role, then they will look for a reservoir project. If you're applying for a production role, they'll look for a production project. If you're applying for SLB, which is more logging company, they look for a logging project or a formation evaluation project. And if you're applying for, let's say, ExxonMobil, and they have come for a wells profile or a drilling profile, then they'll look for a drilling like a project, etc. Right. So I think as a like as you are creating projects, you should be creating projects in all of the different branches. And I think like three major places where you should be having projects is reservoir, production, and formation. Right. So in reserve, like all the three places, if you have projects like you made in this summer vacation, you'll be able to sit for any like role. And I think I will advise everybody to sit for every single role essentially, right? First. So any project, when I talk about project idea, like any graph you see in like petroleum can be converted into a Python code. Like for example, you can use let's say this relative permeability curve, or leverage J function curve, or say like capillary pressure curve, or any curve you can exchange like think about in the entire like subjects, whatever subjects that you have thought about. IPR, TPR also, right? They can be converted into a project. How can they be converted into a project? Simply you have to just take out certain data points, because I think if you go into any book, you'll find out all data points, etc. Right? So you have to find, like, let's say if you want to make the project about Klinkenberg effect, right? Klinkenberg effect, what you need to do is it is a graph between like permeability and inverse of mean pressure, right? So you have to just You have to just find, like in Tara Ahmed, it's already given. They have to find a table with certain like data points of this permeability and mean pressure, right? So if you have like two or three data points, you can simply draw a curve, right? Also, so or you can like, or a lot of times these curves have an equation behind them, and you can use that equation and just put it into Python, and they'll make a graph for you. That graph essentially is the project, okay? And you can give conclusions also, that let's say in the Klinkenberg XBA project, what will happen is that the wherever the curve intersects the y-axis, that is the liquid permeability, I think, right? So like from the gas permeability, you're able to find out the liquid permeability at the point of intersection. That is your conclusion from the project, right? So it's very simple to make. That is what I'm trying to get at, right? Any graph you're able to see can be converted into a Python code, and that can be converted into a project. And what you just need to, and then you have to find, just give a conclusion behind that, and it just takes like 1 to 2 days to make also. And there's also proper resources on the net, like Petroleum from scratch, where they actually write the code with you, and then make the projects in with you, so you can just copy it also from those websites also, right? So
Excuse me, sir.
yes, go on.
Sir, people are writing questions in the chat box. So please, can you answer these?
Right. I'll just there's only one question right now, right? I think
Yes, sir.
geology wala
Actually,
padhna hai kya?
there are few more guests lined up in the next event. So please.
Yeah. I'll just how much time do I have left?
Sir, as you wish, but guest has arrived in the meeting and they
Okay,
have
okay.
their time
I know. Like I just have to cover two couple of things. Like it'll take 5 minutes only, right? 5 minutes is enough.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'll just cover it in 5 minutes and finish it off. Right. I'll answer the question in the last 2 minutes. Okay. Then it's fine. Right. So last 2 minutes, like I'll take 5 minutes entirely. Right. You don't have to worry. Right. So if that is clear, how the project idea is, then you can just like these are some example topics. So make projects in all three. And like for example, here relative permeability, Klinkenberg effect, and material balance. So all of these are examples for reservoir, and well log data .ls file to pandas. These are all examples of logging projects. Okay, if you just look it up on the net, it's very easy to find these logging projects and these related like these reservoir projects, and also IPRTP production project, etc. Right? It's very like it's very easily accessible, but you just need to make them, and like make two projects for each subject, and that will be more than enough, and you can make easy projects. If you want to make a very difficult and a very tough project, or it's like you want to impress the interviewers, you can use linear regression also, and you can use machine learning also to be able to make those projects also. Like, and if you know machine learning in the first hand, but if you don't know, just skip that part and make simple projects. That also works. Now, summer training, very simple. I'll just tell you, like, if when you're gone to the summer training, like, just observe the things around you, take note of that. As I told you, wherever you're going to a drill rig or a GGS, try and like note down the stuff, because those can be directly asked in your interview, and they will be connecting those things, concepts, to whatever you have learned in class. So just like revise those concepts. If you're going to a GGS, revise the concepts of GGS, go to GGS, note down the stuff. That's all. That is everything that you have to do. And like when you're writing summer training in your CV, only include those parts which are the most important, and the part which you have learned the most. That is all that you really need to remember in the summer training part. And when you're making your CV, I think you can ask us also, seniors, about what to include and what not to include. Right. So final, I'll talk about how to make your CV much more effective. Like there's basically two tips I'll just give quickly and move on. The first tip is like include only things which you're good at. Okay, that's the baseline. You don't need to include everything. You don't need to include every subject. Include the subjects you're very good at and move on. You don't need, if you're not good at drilling, don't include drilling in your projects. Okay, and like include this in a CV. Even in the summer training section, only include the parts which you're good at. You don't need to include everything that you have learned in the summer training. And just whatever parts that you have actually written down in the summer training section, you need to be able to answer the question like what you have seen, what are the different parameters, etc., etc., all those things. Right. So when I think we're done with the CV part. And second thing which I want to say is that also try to include some like SP thing or a FP thing so that it puts much more perspective into something you have done outside of academics also, right? Also CV you can like give it to the seniors in the later part so we'll be able to see them also.